So we can all agree that Brook is a holy knight, like, for sure, right? No? Well, I think you ought to reconsider your opinion there, because when you look at his powers, his lore, and who else shares all these common threads, it becomes widely clear, I think, that Oda is doing something very sneaky here with Brook. He's making him the secret weapon that Luffy needs to destroy the Celestial Dragons. Now, you might think that Brook, the Straw Hat's goofiest, weirdest, and downright pervy skeleton, has no business being a holy knight. He's much better suited for panty raids, not leveling a country in a day, right?
I guess you're gonna miss the panty raid.
The what?
And while sure, I mean on paper, it sounds like a pretty wild idea, but if you've been locked in on the events of Elbaf and the God Valley flashback, you'd realize that this is actually one of the most Oda-coded reveals I have ever seen in the story. And to be completely fair, you might have wondered this yourself, this isn't even the first time I've talked about this specific idea. I actually made this video at the beginning of the year when we first met Gunko talking about the possibility of this idea, and I actually needed to revisit this today because the parallels are just growing way deeper, way darker, and a little bit stankier with every single new chapter we get, especially the ones we've gotten recently. So much so that I can smell the stench of Imu's grubby little paws from all the way over here. Oof. So why do I think that Brook is a holy knight, or was a holy knight, and how exactly does this connect to the abyssal nonsense between Imu, Herald, and, well, all the other holy knights we've been getting recently? And I think it's no surprise that Oda loves to bury the biggest surprises in One Piece in the most ridiculous places. The Sun God is a slapstick rubber boy who was foreshadowed in an arc where Eminem tried to kill a bunch of bird people. So maybe I'm weird, but I think it's absolutely okay to ask if Brook used to be a war criminal, because I'm gonna say it, he probably was one. Let's just start with the fact that Brook looks straight up like a former holy knight, right? Even before the silhouette of him was dropped in the mini Gunko shellshock flashback we got before we got into the Herald and God Valley stuff, we should have already caught on once we saw Shamrock in action for the first time. Because for starters, Brook's got the drip, right? His coat, frilled cuffs, that silly little ascot, and busts out formal sword stances like it's no one else's business. He kind of exudes the rich kid from God's country vibes better than anyone in the entire series, beside maybe Shamrock himself. But some eagle-eyed viewers probably started to smell the celestial stink of Brook when the coolest Gorosei Venus Juro landed on Egghead. And this is really where the abyssal darkness hidden deep inside his cufflinks really hit the stage. I was just warming up, but now it's time for me to freeze up. Help! Well, surely you've noticed that Brook and Nasjiro are ice-cold skeleton brother boys. And this isn't your mom's ice cream either, this is spooky hell ice. Like 9th ring of hell deep, chilling, soul-shattering underworld cold level. In fact, it's apparently cold enough to cut through the soul itself, as in the type of bitterness you'd expect from someone with an intimate understanding of death itself. So I personally wanted to discuss if this hell freezing power is reserved for those with connections to the abyss itself, maybe. Like, Brook derives his power from the underworld, we know this, but clearly so does Venus Juro. There must be something deeper here than just, we both are from hell, yes? Very nice. And so I decided that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into Brook's devil fruit, since that was obviously a prime suspect to me. Right out of the gate, of course, his fruit is busted and sticks out like a sore thumb already by itself, in my opinion. Well, you might want to take a look at this big dog here. Brook isn't just familiar with the underworld, his powers are straight up the underworld. The Yomi Yomi no Mi quite literally means underworld, and not just revive fruit. Now, to be fair, it also does count as the word revive, since the full word that this fruit pulls from is Yomigairu, which means to come back to life, but its roots are in the word Yomi, which is just the Japanese equivalent of the underworld, and Kairu just means to return, or frog, but not in this case. So it's the return from the underworld, aka revival, but the fruit is just Yomi Yomi, underworld. And when we first meet Brook, there was really nothing more to that idea, other than the soft confirmation that hell apparently does exist in the form of the underworld in One Piece, but then why would Venus Juro have these exact same ice powers? But it does make a lot more sense when you remember that the Gorosei and Imu are of course all about these spooky, scary pentagrams, demonic nonsense, and heaven versus hell stuff, right? So Brook having powers adjacent to Imu's whole aesthetic, the same powers as someone who likely has a tier 3 abyssal marking, the Gorosei, yeah, that right there is what I like to call in the business a big red flag planted by Oda. It's also what I called your sister when she hit on me last night. Boom! Got him! I'm sorry. My team members have told me I need to make insults at you, the poor audience, to be hip and, you know, on the trends of the Twitch streamers. If that offended you, please forgive me. I love you. I miss you. I need you. What has the internet come to? Well, Brook's Devil Fruit level up post time skip also really stood out to me when I really went and looked back at what happened there, because I completely somehow forgot that when he describes how he got access to the 6 Soul King stuff, the dude literally prayed in order to activate it. And sure, in that moment, it's kind of treated as a joke, right? As Oda does love doing, but a skeleton praying is just specific enough to feel like some sort of leftover habit from a past life. A life up in the Holy Land, praying to the great god Imu. You know, Brook prays like someone who grew up in a hyper-religious environment. And I don't know about you, but I think that the Holy Land kind of counts as the most hyper-religious place in One Piece, period. I just wanted to draw attention to that now, since it's definitely something I forgot about, and it feels way more intentional on the nose now that we're entering all the, you know, god stuff in One Piece and learn so much more about Imu's true powers. Next up though, it's milk time. Grab your milk, everybody. This is my 1 liter of milk I have to consume as a German every day. We're getting thick in this milk talk. Thick milk, bro. All right. Well, we do know that Luffy drinks milk and comically, you know, regenerates because he's a cartoon demigod. It's a very classic Popeye or Tom and Jerry-esque move, right? But for some reason, the only other person who can do that same thing in the story is Brook. The Straw Hats musician can also chuck down some big loads of milk and regions because, well, why exactly? His bones shouldn't even be able to absorb nutrients. The milk should just fall out of himself. But alas, milk heals Brook instantly. Now, why am I, Big Milker Manu, focused so much on this detail? Well, it's all because of the God Valley flashback, to be real with you. I get it, it's a bit of an odd transition, but I promise it's gonna make sense in a moment. And like, I don't know, maybe like 10 of you actually caught on what I'm about to say and are very amped. So, we found out years ago that Lulusia Kingdom, the one that got Uranus, you know, this one, is actually the home of the greatest milk farms in the One Piece world. Yes, I know, weird, but this is canon. There's even a marine captain who is obsessed with this milk specifically. And what's even crazier is that when we see the scene with the milk cartoons that Luffy and Brook are drinking to heal their injuries, the logo looks very similar to the tier 2 Holy Knights mark. Like, am I crazy with the horns and all? I don't think so. It's got the horns and a cross symbol below it. All I'm saying is, Oda has given us a lot less foreshadowing than this thing. And I'm not saying that this milk from Lulusia is actually magic and that's why Imu nuked it. I think that maybe Brook's ability to actually heal from the milk here might low-key actually have been a hint or tied into his abyssal healing factor that he of course would have gotten as a Holy Knight from Imu. And then it just also happens to work as a silly little bone calcium milk joke that Oda can just throw in there without anyone worrying about it. And you know who actually ended up being tied to Lulusia, the Milklands? Yeah, Itties and Teach. Davy D. Itties and Davy D. Teach were escaping to Lulusia from God Valley, and it's kind of made me wonder if maybe, just maybe, Brook, the magical pentagrams, and Imu's dark magic might all be tied to the Davy clan specifically. Now, this is not the main point or the big payoff of this video, but it would be an unbelievably insane reveal if we find out that Brook this entire time was also a member of the Davy clan who went up to the Holy Land as some sort of spy before Zebek then made his way up there instead. I would definitely explain how Zebek knew about Imu and where to find them, since we do know that the Holy Knights get their tier 2 mark from Imu directly themselves. Again, not the main point of this video, video, just wanted to throw it out there, but regardless of whether he is a Davy or not, Brook having a tier 2 Holy Knight mark before he died would explain a lot about his powers. Weird regeneration, soul piercing, big cold energy. I personally think for someone who ate a devil fruit that brings you back from the dead once and that's it, he's got somehow way too many great tools in his belt now. Like seriously, Brook is absurdly confident around Big Mom even, not because he's absolutely delusional, which, you know, he's also, but not in this moment. Brook stands in front of a Gunko and basically says, "Get got, woman," and then he literally damages her soul-powered homies and hard counters her own soul powers without even flinching. Which I think you have to at the very least admit is like the most Holy Knight overconfident in themselves move ever. "I'm immortal and strong, you lose, Lin Lin," is kind of like the vibe I've been getting here, which also, by the way, was the first scene where I really liked Brook as a character back here in Whole Cake Island. And obviously, there's the more literal connection between Brook and the Holy Knights, which is their shared powers. The Holy Knights are these timeless, ageless, borderline immortal warriors, and you know who's the exact same thing? Brook, just with his broken devil fruit. Now, what if I told you that this might go even deeper than just that though? Will you believe me? I sure hope you do, but you probably don't, because I want to circle back just a little bit to Emu and Brook specifically, because I think that there might be a much deeper connection and meaning behind why their powers might be so similar. Really spending some time and looking into it, Brook's soul is untouchable in a way that no other characters in One Piece is. He can leave his body, travel independently, phase through barriers, and even interact with other souls. Is it me, or is this just literally the same power set as Emu straight up, dude? Like, immortality, soul manipulation, soul attacking, spiritual body stuff, and it kind of makes me think that maybe, just maybe, Brook is Emu. No, just kidding. That would be insane. No, what I'm actually saying is that Emu might have the same powers as Brook because all of these powers are Brook's. Because if you haven't noticed yet recently, Emu is a little bit of a thief, right? A little Bandito vibes from old good Emu-sama there, because we do know that someone else on the Holy Knights can also do Domi Reversi, because during God Valley specifically, the Davy clan transformed into demons before Emu ever made landfall. Might be Garling's power, that'd be kinda cool. But we've also seen Emu use arrows from Gunko's fruit when they attacked Cobra and Sabo. So, assuming that that's truly using the exact same power, it would suggest several very unsettling possibilities. Either Emu can copy Devil Fruit abilities, steal them, or tap into the powers of anyone who has a mark. And since Brook has powers very similar to the immortality that Emu provides, what if that's because Emu got that power from the Revive Fruit user in the first place? Interestingly enough, we don't actually know when or how even Brook got his Devil Fruit, and it is insanely broken. He also just assumed he didn't get powers from the fruit in life, which is the perfect lie Emu could have actually told him, since, you know, this would be the type of power that Emu, assuming they had the fruit, would only give to a Holy Knight, so they could then steal it for themselves and tap into it. And so what if that's literally what happened, dude? Emu learned immortality, or modified it, based on the Revive Fruit's powers, and then gave the actual fruit to Brook, since Brook was a Blade of God or even a Holy Knight. I mean, like tier 3, you get the idea. Which could totally change the entire endgame of the story when you think about it, since this would position Brook as an unnatural counter to his old gang. The traitorous Brook coming full circle to help the Straw Hats override the immortality of the other Holy Knights could be pretty exciting, and I also think it's time I told you what really sent me down this spiral to begin with, and it is actually the Abyss pentagrams. We do know that Emu needs someone else to paint them in order to travel. They can't just make them remotely, right? We see that with Harold. And we also know from Road that apparently the mark that Harold made inside of Ohara's castle is similar to the ones from a far-off country, a country we know is tied to Brook since he went there during the time skip. This mark is very similar to the ones from the island Harahitenya, a location whose name funnily loosely translates to "I'm pretty hungry," and is also known as Hungaria or Lazy Bones Island. This is where Brook got sent during the time skip, and he literally appeared out of a demonic circle. Sure, in the end it looks like it was actually Kuma's bubble that moved him, right? We see the print of the paw, but he did pop out of a pentagram still. A place where everyone was praying to the devil the exact same way that the Holy Knights pray to Imu. Grant our wish, please, the same way someone gets the covenants from Imu. Now, my personal thought was that maybe Brook appeared here as Oda foreshadowing his connection to Imu, but literally because he had remnants of the Abyss in his system and that got messed up when they did their ritual. Like the same portal pentagram power might have just grabbed Brook from his Kuma launch and brought him here instead where he wasn't actually supposed to land, which does feel low-key at least kind of likely since during the Kuma flashback we saw him visit all the other different islands that he sent all the Straw Hats to, except Brook. That's a little bit of a weird exception on Oda's part, I think, but it would make a lot more sense if that's because Kuma wasn't even originally planning on sending Brook to that island and Brook got summoned away instead. I just think that maybe the mark fell off his flesh when he lost it, right? But maybe the Abyss marker is a two-part system, the soul and the flesh. But since there is no flesh marker, Imu can't control Brook, but Brook, with his underworld powers, is still tied to the same mechanisms that Imu uses for the Abyss pentagrams to this day. So it might not be a remnant of that Holy Knight power after all, it might seriously just be the case that Brook can also use the Abyss without fear of Imu's evil control freak vibes ever touching him. Not to mention that the name of the island that these marks come from stands out big time when it comes to Brook's character specifically. I mean, Oda often uses comedy in One Piece to hide some deeper symbolism, right? Again, we talked about it with Nika and everything. And in this case, I think that Hungaria and Lazy Bones Island are of course being used to represent themes of death, gluttony, and spiritual beginnings. Something that Brook, unsurprisingly, is an absolute perfect match for. Dang, it's almost like I planned for this, because I did. Brook's a big skeleton whose hunger jokes never ever stop. Sometimes to our detriment, despite having no stomach. Classic Oda humor, and like he's literally a lazy pile of bones in very many of the gag scenes that he gets. Oda's pretty much made it very clear at this point that Brook's whole, well, everything revolves around decay, emptiness, and indigestion. It all kind of feels like light-hearted silly bits on the surface until you remember how mythologies worldwide actually treat hunger and death specifically. Hey, shocker, Manu's talking about mythology in a One Piece theory again. Woo! Well, in folklore, hunger is one of the defining characteristics of souls trapped in the underworld. We've got hungry ghosts, demons who feed endlessly and gluttonously, and spirits who crave energy but can never satisfy that craving. My favorite ones of these are, by the way, the legendary phantoms Inky, Blinky, Pinky, and Clyde, those hungry little ghosts that eat the power pellets so that the dreaded Pac-Man actually starves. Yeah, the ghosts have names. Also, since I didn't mention it earlier, Brook also just gives off total yokai vibes, right? Like the same way that the GODSLAYER are all seemingly based on different spirits from Japanese folklore, Brook seems to have the same appearance and vibes as the so-called Gashadokuro, which is a spirit that takes the form of a giant skeleton made of the skulls of people who died in the battlefield or of starvation and famine. Huh! Look at that, a very famous Japanese yokai, something we know is directly tied to Imu and the concepts of hunger. Go get him, Holy Knight, yokai demon, Gashadokuro Brook-san. You get the point. Ghosts and their eternal hunger have the symbolic way of expressing grief, regret, or unfinished business, which are all the themes that define Brook during his 50-year drift in the Florian Triangle. Speaking of which, let's shift into that, shall we? And first off, I've got some words to share now that we've seen a direct reference to Harold's misty adventures as similar to the Florian Triangle monsters that just happened, yeah? Brook, of course, wandered about for roughly 50 years in that very messed up triangle, and I do think that speaks a lot to his own origins, why the Rumbar pirates died, and what this true purpose of that location actually might be. Do you ever stop to think about how like absolutely crazy devoted Brook actually is? I have been once again recently, and something about it kind of sticks out to me. He's the man who kept his promise to Laboon for 50 years, going so far as to repair his own broken body through fruit and willpower, just so he could fulfill a promise to this whale. This is normal behavior. I would argue this is knight behavior. That's kind of their whole thing, right? Like, devotion until the very end. That's why Emu calls the squires devoted blades of God. So that was the first thing that I really gleaned from this. But then of course I also got back into how the Rumbar pirates actually died and where that happened: in the Florian Triangle. Whoever killed them actually coated their blades in poison and executed the Rumbar pirates inside the mist of the Florian Triangle. You know what Harold used to do? Well, he kills people for the government in the mist, very similar to that of the Florian Triangle. And you know why he does that? Because Big Boy Emu tells him he's gotta do it. Which kind of makes you wonder, is the mist part of it? Is the mist an emu pull? I personally think probably, and I think knowing that makes me wonder if the true reason that Brook and the Rumbar pirates were murdered is exactly because Brook was present in that crew on that ship. Let's just face it, friend, the Florian Triangle in One Piece might just be the most perfect place for anyone to assassinate someone in the story. For years we treated it like just a spooky narrative set piece, but when you consider the big creatures in it, looking a lot like Emu, and Emu is now seen having his big giant king assassinate in mist very similar to it, me kinda thinks that there is a darker picture being painted here. It's a zone of silence, like a library, but for murder. Though I guess there's a lot of stories about murders in libraries. I believe that the true purpose of the triangle is actually a dead site, a place with a crazy scary legend built around it so that most pirates don't even come near it. That way, the government can actually execute anyone who enters it. But Brook, being a holy knight, might not have even really batted an eye at it because he hadn't been a pirate for that long at this point. He would have just assumed it was a regular place with some dense fog, not realizing it was his own undoing. Since we know that Emu doesn't, like loose threats. They literally executed all of Lulusia because Sabo was there. They want to get rid of anyone who knows about them, and Brook, I think, is one of these people. I believe that just maybe Brook's death was actually planned by Emu and the Holy Knights, because if you know the person you're gonna kill is actually immortal, and not only that, they might come back to life then because of their devil fruit. They might have just planned for the Rumbar pirates, luring them into the Florian Triangle and killing Brook there so that specifically he could not find his body and actually return to life. If that was actually planned out, that would make a lot of sense, and it would make most sense for someone who knows Brook's powers and abilities. Brook himself kind of admits that it was pretty lucky that he even found his own body again in the mist, and once he actually finds his body, what happens? Gecko Moria, someone who works for the government at this point and is allowed and tolerated in the Florian Triangle apparently, just happens to find him specifically and steals his shadow. I don't know, sounds sus. But even if his death wasn't planned by the Holy Knight, that doesn't fully matter because his death was of course the tragic end to his tale. It was the start of his new, even better one. He no longer had to dwell on his past and was pushing towards the future, but I do think it's important that we talk about his deeper past even more now, and specifically his ties to Gunko, since they're like uber mega important to the story. Allow me to flash us back to the little Gunko flashback we got before we got into the other flashback that then got into the other Oda sneakily drops some of the most important Brook-related content that we've ever gotten, which to be fair isn't a lot, which is also why I even get to make this video to begin with. Who's Gunko, right? Like, what's this girl's deal? Well, we do know that Gunko is a member of the Manmire clan, one of the higher ranking families tied to the Holy Knights, but we also know that she wasn't a devoted Blade of God until after Brook had already died in the Florian Triangle. Because the God Valley flashback shows us that she's only very recently become a devoted Blade of God in that tournament. And essentially just doubles down on the fact that young G here was jilling with old B for quite a while before he deed. Her flashback shows us a young Brook who during a hella brief yap session told her that he dreamed of becoming a pirate. Which is actually a fairly somber moment for Brook, considering in his later life he's just trying to see them drawers, right? Character development, I guess. And when we use all the context that we've gotten, his tale that he gives to Luffy, the outfit we see him in, and that dream of his, it made something very clear to me. Young Brook was pretty trapped. He was someone obligated to serve a powerful family rather than following his own desires, presumably the Manmeyer family, something that he was probably ashamed of and frustrated with, but then found some comfort in the young Gunko, someone impressionable, someone that he could maybe change. Ideally, he could teach her that the Holy Knights were, how do I put this, and this might come as a shock, they're not the best people. Which would actually line up very well with the fact that Brook was a leader of a military convoy from an unknown nation, which is a totally unnecessary and cryptic way of explaining your own backstory if you ask me. And also kind of reminds me of how Shanks talks, honestly. That pirate, that place. Be a little bit more cryptic, Shanks, I dare you, I almost got a little bit of what you were saying. Which, again, makes sense because I too would not tell everyone I'm from the Holy Land, since, they're all kind of evil, and we all know that. I kind of wonder if Brook was stationed as a military leader for a hidden Red Line nation, or as I previously mentioned, maybe he is just a Davy Clan member who weaseled his way in to leak info out before eventually abandoning the government, the same way that Shanks coincidentally does in chapter 1168. But regardless of the direction that Oda takes this in, this does breathe some fresh life into his relationship with Gunko entirely. Their bond to me kind of feels like a knight and princess dynamic, more so than a casual friendship. It's more, adult child kind of vibe. If Brook was assigned to protect Gunko, maybe as a guardian or a retainer of sorts for the Manmeyer household, this could explain their closeness, his sense of duty, and why she remembers him so fondly. Maybe the entire thing with Laboon only is so important to Brook because he felt like he abandoned Gunko and, didn't fulfill his duty to her. And again, Gunko's memories are apparently very powerful because even though she's Imu's vessel with some serious trauma and probably some mind and memory manipulation, she still recognized him consciously and subconsciously by listening, to his music, wanting him as a slave, and then the entire comment about him being her father? Like, I even kind of forgot about that one, honestly. Maybe it's even way deeper and he's just straight up a full-on Manmeyer and her actual blood dad. That sounds wrong, but you know what I mean. But I kind of like the idea that he's more of a father figure, since Oda likes to riff on found family much more than anything else in the story. But now, this also raises another major question. What actually happened to separate them? Was Gunko taken from Brook by the other Holy Knights, or did Brook actually abandon her to pursue his own dreams, leaving this poor girl to become the woman that she is today? I couldn't tell you which one I think is the case, but either way, it would be extremely tragic. I don't know, I think both have their upsides. I kind of like the idea that maybe Brook abandoned Gunko out of a sense that he needed to do something about the government, right? And then in return, kind of now feels guilty for abandoning her. But honestly, I'm chill with either option. There's definitely a stronger case, at least for me, with Gunko being kidnapped by the Holy Knights, because it kind of adds this super deep reason for why Brook joined the Rumber Pirates specifically. Because if he lost Gunko, someone he was supposed to protect, someone who mattered to him, he would want to fill that hole. And Brook sought out a life dedicated to joy to do that. He joined the Rumber Pirates, making people smile again, which was the only way he knew to fill the space that losing Gunko had left behind. And then fate would just really twist that knife if in the modern era, Gunko, now fully aligned with the Holy Knights, loves Brook music. She wants to capture him, not realizing their old connection that may once have bound them. But it's not all lost, of course, because tragically, right before Imu locks in and goes full possessive and, channels himself into Gunko, Gunko actually remembers a lot of stuff and recognizes Brook, which again all hints at another way that specifically Brook might be the person to undo Imu's powers, I think. Recently, but really throughout the story, Oda's been making a really big point about parent and child bonds, right? He did it with Bonnie and Kuma, he's now doing it again with Loki and Harold, so if that applies to Brook and Gunko, yet again, we're seeing a case for the power of love, baby. Because if Imu's influence over the Knights can be softened, cracked, or even bypassed through emotional bonds, then Brook has another way now to actually be the final solution on Elbaf. One Piece, of course, has always been a story where love straight up overrides cruelty, and Elbaf is absolutely no stranger to that very concept. My man Scopper Gaban is literally the Minister of Love, and apparently knows the secret to defeating the Holy Knights as well. There's also the concept of Rome and Dawn being a super important idea in the story and might truly just be hinting at the fact that love is what brings the new dawn. Also, if this is the case, shout out to my boy Sanji, whose entire character is built around love as a power. That kind of makes you wonder if it would push Emu in this almost Voldemort-y type of corner where it's like, you don't understand love, and love is the only true power. Or what I would prefer is that Emu actually was obsessed with Lily and lovesick, and that's actually the reason why they went absolutely mad out of, love sickness, basically. Also, speaking of love, I would love it if you could check out the Ohara Patreon. It's full of some really cool content I think that you would love, like assets from my videos, early chapter reactions, some other fun stuff planned in the new year. Trust me, I think it's worth it if you like One Piece stuff. I at least hope so. But back to the scary Demon Lord Emu here. I seriously think that Emu's big weakness might just straight up be love. And I do hate that idea. Kind of. But it does work. I don't think they'll slay Emu with the power of love and a kiss. They might just be able to override some of the dumb broken powers with love. Powers that, as I mentioned earlier, might again also tie back into Brook's role in the final saga. And don't think I forgot the stuff about music either, because apparently that's also super important. Brook's a musician that touches the soul, and Scopper's immortality overriding attack was the Axe Heaven Symphony, and also seems to be tied into music. So Brook might just be uber triple powerful against Emu. And then there's also the symbolism of Brook as a musician altogether. Music in One Piece isn't just entertainment, it's literally the stories of the past sent down to the next generation. And that's why I'm so confident that Bing Sake is the true story of Joy Boy, since song is a binding force between the generations of the entire One Piece era. The Rumber Pirates made it a mission to make children smile, and the one requirement for joining the crew was loving music. Something that Luffy, by the way, also thinks is giga critical to his crew, something that Oda knew before he started writing One Piece, that the musician was gonna be super important. And considering his heartbeat is the drums of liberation, yeah, Oda, I think you're not sly anymore at this point. I got it. Music makes you lose control. So when you really look at Brook with the Devil Fruit Soul stuff, the music stuff, and the love stuff, old Brook here might be the strongest weapon on Luffy's crew. Still undiscovered, obviously, and it really makes so much sense now that I look at the title of these characters. What does Emu call their soldiers? Devoted Blades of God, Holy Knights, and ironically, that still works for Brook in his new life. He is not the devoted blade of the god Emu, he's the devoted blade of the sun god Luffy, a literal holy knight in the army against the Sea Devil. Brook's origins, if they actually turn out to be in the Holy Land, have come full circle at this point. He's a pirate, but he's fulfilling his life's true purpose. He's bringing joy and smiles to people through his music, and uses his blade to defend the god of joy and liberation, a figure he would have probably hoped would free him from Emu's shackles long ago when he was forced to be a warrior of Marijoa. And so when Brook left the Holy Knight system, whether it was as a defector, a runaway, or someone casting him aside, he finally got the chance that he really needed. He had to push through a ton of tragedy, but he walks out a hero and, kind of getting the reward for his loyalty and patience. Joining Luffy's crew, a group dedicated to joy, is honestly crazy poetic if half of what we talked about today actually turns out to be true. He switched gods, essentially. No more does the Holy Knight Brook serve Emu's oppressive will. He follows now the path of Yorkie, the path of Luffy, the path of Nika, liberation, and joy, which is what the final saga of One Piece is in the end all about, right? Big cosmic cycles breaking, oppressive systems collapsing, and chosen loyalties redefining the world. It's kind of like my boy Mewtwo says in the first Pokemon movie, I see now that the circumstances of one's birth are irrelevant. It is what you do with the gift of life that determines who you are. Dang. Sometimes I forget how hard that quote goes and that it's from a giant weird alien cat born from a test tube. Good on you, Mewtwo. Good on you. Anyhow, my point is that Brook's transition from one god to another embodies that theme perfectly. He's living proof that the cycle can shatter and be broken. God, I love this so much. Do you not want this to be true? Be real. Like, the reason I needed to make this video again is because I find this so good. Like, I would be so devastated if not part of this at least is true. Please, you gotta admit that this would be so good and make Brook's character so insanely crazy in retrospect. A character that I've always felt has kind of, not been getting the love from Oda that he really deserves, but if this is what it's all building up to, right? Right? Okay, man, this has been a doozy so far already, but I do think just maybe there might be an even deeper meaning lying, behind all this than I even realized to this point. And yet again, it does trail, of course, back to our recent stuff, God Valley, which is why I needed to make this video about Brook again, since all of this ties to Emu, Death, the Underworld. They've just been standing out to me so much. Get ready for more mythology with Manu, baby! Because so far we've looked at Brook's design, his abilities, his past, his relationships, and all the thematic blah blah, right, that connects him to the Holy Knights and his backstory. But in case you haven't realized yet, and I talk about it in every video, One Piece is a very myth-heavy series, which makes me want to look into more myths regarding the series, and something that stood out to me during God Valley was the name of Roger's final attack. Great Fire God Ace, or more accurately from the Japanese, Hino Kagutsuchi no Ace. So, who's that fire god and why do we even care about him in the context of Brook? I want to start with the story of Izanami and Kagutsuchi. Izanami is this absolute baddie of a primordial mother goddess who dies while giving birth to Kagutsuchi, the god of fire, because he's on fire, and her death sends her then to Yomi, the underworld, where she becomes its ruler. Pretty simple, she is the goddess of death that gave birth to the god of fire. Then we got Izanagi, that's her hubby, who tries to retrieve her, fails, and then seals the underworld behind him, behind a giant rock. This myth is one of the foundational stories of Shinto mythology in Japan. Fire and death become intertwined, the birth of flame kills life and then descends into the underworld, becoming an origin point for cycles of destruction and rebirth. Now, let's take a good old stab at how this might apply to good old One Piece, because Imu's destructive power is fairly freaky. It's nation erasing, reality warping, and entirely outside the normal power scaling of the story. They also seem to have dominion over, you guessed it, life and death itself. Immortality, the dark creepy abyss, all that stuff, they are literally the devil, which also makes them the god of the underworld, the god of hell, whose powers coincide a little bit with Brook's. Now, with the Ace stuff, the fire god, not the donut kid, I think there's a secret that we've actually also been missing here, because Imu might actually be directly tied to Nika and sealed away in the underworld. The same place that Brook can draw his own powers from and potentially go. The abyss, that's just another word for Tartarus, the depths, the underworld, all connected, it's all coming together. What I'm saying is that Imu, you might actually be Nika's mother? I've leveled up, move over Luffy's mom theories, right? It's now Nika's mom theories, because we're evolving on this channel. We're not treading the same territory all the time. Or probably not, it seems very wild even for my own taste, but I think the concept at least is there. Imu at the end of the first world is sealed away inside the abyss after all the Nika stuff, with the Hell Flame Serpent, again, flames and the underworld and death, underworld, yeah? And now you can only appear as a shadowy, foggy demon figure in the throne room, but the power of flame, the Forbidden Sun, and Nika's powers can free them from the abyss. So that's why they are trying to recreate it now. Also, by the way, just because it hit me, I just had to very quickly look it up. Apologies. If you're curious and saying Luffy isn't actually the fire god, he's the sun god, well, Izanami is also the mother of Amaterasu, who is the actual sun god. It works in both ways, really. If anything, this would just suggest that there is a actual fire god and a sun god, and they're different entities, maybe the Hell Flame Serpent and Nika, who we think are fighting in the first one. Well, it all makes sense, is all I'm saying. And Brook, the man with the power of Yomi, the underworld, might be able to reveal this to everyone, or he might just be able to get people to hell so that they can defeat Imu there. Imagine how sick it would be if Brook was able to do some crazy musical pentagram nonsense so that Zoro and people could fight in hell. They're kind of linked to it already. God of Hell, King of Hell, Ifrit, while everyone else is fighting the world government in the overworld. By the way, basically the plot of film Red, which Oda actually said, something like that is gonna happen in the real story, so yeah, that would be that. Brook's past with Emu might make him the ace in the hole needed to take down Emu once and for all. And what if all the other stuff is true as well, right? Like his upbringing, his servitude. Well then damn, that's an incredibly full circle moment there if you ask me. It would be legendary, god-level storytelling as One Piece deserves. Also, speaking of full circle, you know what else is full circle? The Grand Line. And you know what's in the Grand Line? Literally dozens of insane islands, a lot of which we talked about today. And when you factor in the rest of the ocean that Emu rules over, it's hundreds. So if you've ever been curious about what the entire One Piece world actually looks like and what the most detailed version of it is that we have, you should check out this video where, well, we made the most detailed One Piece map so far in existence. You can check it out right there. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much to all of our great Patreons. Again, you guys really make a difference to what we can do on this channel here, and I really appreciate it. But also, if you watch till the end, that also means the world to me. And I will see you in the next video on